If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Scott to the show. Scott, thanks for coming on.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know your encounter took place in Michigan. If you would you mind starting from the beginning and just kind of tell us what you're doing and walk us into what happened?
Okay, this is back in like the mid to late 70s. I can't remember exactly what year it happened. I was about 10 to 13. We lived in a rural area of Michigan in like Benzie County. And we were like some of the original latchkey kids that they talk about in the 70s. Mom had to work, Dad had to work. And during the summer, we were pretty much free to do whatever we want. And we would hang out with some of the other neighbor kids. Even though it was rural, there were some kids nearby. And we would like to ride bikes and do stuff. And our neighbor was a young lady about my age. And another family friend. There was a bunch of girls for some reason. We decided to go walking in the woods that was kind of behind her grandfather's property. He lived like one more door down. And it was in Michigan, they have things called two tracks. They go in their trucks and drive between trees and go out in the woods and make two tracks going all the way out into the woods. And he had two tracks that went out into the woods, and we were just following them. That led down to a river. And we had been back there before. There were, we'd been back there to fish and stuff like that. We'd walked there many times with our families and did things together. So, but at this time it was like 4 or 5 kids, and we went walking down there. And as you're walking down towards the river, it's about a quarter of a mile walk. The two track kind of just weaves around trees and hills. And there's a point in the two track where kind of to your left, it's kind of a deep ditch or gully. You wouldn't want to drive your vehicle off of it, or you're really going to be stuck. It probably goes down about, I'm guessing, about 10 feet. There's probably a little bit of a creek down there sometime. And then it has like across that little creek, then it kind of rises up at it, in a hill, but not a steep hill. You can walk it fairly easy, and there's trees around, but it's not like thick forest or anything. And then on the right side of this two track is a tall hill, probably about 20 feet tall, and steep enough that you would have to Spider-Man crawl up this thing, with your hands and your feet and your knees trying to get up. And I don't know, one of the kids said something like, what's up on the top of that hill, or let's go play King of the Mountain, something like that. So we were all trying to get up that hill on the right side of us. And, we're all 5 of us kids are climbing and stuff. And at one point, I was probably about halfway up this hill. I decided to look back to see how far I was ahead of everybody else. And as I looked down and then across the two track and then kind of down in that little gully and then up the hill that was behind that gully, I saw something move. And my first thought was my dog. I had a fairly good-sized dog that was part collie and part lab. And so I thought it was him at first. I was trying to concentrate on this movement. And as I was looking at this movement, I saw more movement to my left. And when I looked to my left, there was my dog coming from the left going to the right. So that got me wondering, well, what am I looking at over here? And my first thought was, well, it must be, one of the neighbor girl's family. She had like an uncle, and that would be in those woods, and she had her dad, of course, and her grandfather. There were reasons for them to be in the woods, and I thought, well, maybe it's probably one of them, but why are they dressed that way? Because this was summertime, and this person looked like they were wearing like a really thick kind of camouflage. To me, it almost looked like have you ever seen that insulation that's probably in your attic or whatever, and it's covered with dirt or dust? It kind of had this like grayish brown tint to it, but it was kind of matted and stuff. And when I was trying to track to see what this thing is, it would blend with the trees behind it. That was the thing that I thought was kind of odd. I'm not talking like this predator, camouflage thing. It just happened to be the same color as these trees behind it, the bark of the trees. So I'm trying to make out what this is, and I thought, well, just look at the face, So I kept moving up and looking up and looking up his body, thinking, well, where's the face? And then when I saw the face, it didn't make sense to me. It was like, because I was expecting, nose and regular features, somebody that I would recognize, because I was fully expecting this to be one of the neighbor girl's family. And the face, it just, I couldn't comprehend the face, because it just didn't, I couldn't make out eyes or anything. And then this thing was moving kind of left to right, and it was kind of going down that slope of in that gully. So, and then it kind of at the bottom of the gully, it kind of disappeared around the bend of the 2-track and stuff. I hope I'm describing this well.
Yeah, you're doing fine.
And that was one of the times when I really realized this thing is tall, because that gully was deep, but I could still see its head. It wasn't like above the thing, but I mean, it had to be fairly tall for me to still see the head as it disappeared, around the bend of the gully, following alongside that 2-track. So one of the girls happened to be close to me, and I turned to her and I said, "Hey, I think I just saw Bigfoot." And she's kind of like, "Yeah, right," or thinking I was just goofing around or playing. And I said, "No, I think we really need to leave." So I kind of talked all the other kids to, let's get going. And we ran all the way back out of the woods and back home. I'm not sure if they ever really believed me, or if I was just, pranking them or what. And as silly as it sounds, I guess the rest of the day was just spent kind of doing other kid things like riding bikes and shooting hoops and stuff. I told my parents when they came home, but I think they were like, yeah, right. And, I just, as time went on, I started second guessing myself as a kid. I mean, I always had something of an imagination, and there was a lot of these drive-in documentary kind of movies back in the mid to late 70s regarding UFOs and the Bermuda Triangle, and there was a couple, 3, I'm sure, that dealt with like the abominable snowman and Bigfoot. So I was really starting to get to a point where I was second guessing myself and really didn't think much more about it. I mean, I kind of followed sightings and Monster Quest, things like that, off and on, but I never really got really reinterested in what I saw until I started listening to podcasts. And I listened to a couple different podcasts that led me to your podcast, and just some of the things they said made me start thinking, well, maybe I did see something. So
yeah, and a normal kid's reaction, if it's just overactive imagination, your reaction wouldn't have been, "I think we need to leave. I think we need to get out of here." You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And even as an adult, I think I did it with my encounter. Everyone I've talked to that's had an encounter, you always second guess yourself. You're always like, "God, did I really see that? Was I hallucinating? Was I?" And I think that's just normal human reaction, because it's hard to place what you saw. It's like I was talking about this on the last show. I hear a lot of hunters say, "Well, I saw a gorilla in the woods." Well, we don't have gorillas out here running in the woods in Washington State. And it's just, and you're never too hard on those people, because they're trying to make sense of what they saw. And I think a lot of times, if you can't make sense of it, then you go to, well, maybe I didn't see that. Maybe I mistook what I saw. I'm curious, was there any details from the face that you remember?
Well, that was the thing at the time. I mean, one of the things I was going to comment on that kind of threw me off, I had seen the Patty film, obviously, at that time, and some of the pictures from it. And this one was like more lanky. It wasn't like that, barrel-chested kind of look to it. And so that was one of the reasons I thought it was a person in a suit, like a camouflage thing. I really did. And but it also kind of, my brain, I was like flipping through my like the files of my mind, trying to find something that was comparable to it. And one of the things is there was an old cartoon called Johnny Quest where he fought this mummy, and just the way the bandages and stuff wrapped around his face, that was the closest I could come to the face. And but it wasn't quite right. It was, I think, looking back on it, I think there was fur covering up a large part of the face, but not all of it. I think also the face was like a dark, maybe charcoal gray, very dark. And I think one of the things that was throwing me off is, I think since I was kind of walking a little bit at an angle, I was expecting the face to be more rounded, and I think it was more flat. And so my brain had like this weird disconnect where it's trying to make out a human face, and it wasn't there. The features for a human face weren't there. It was maybe more of a brow ridge, more deep sunk eyes. I never really saw the eyeballs. It just looked like black pits, but I think it was more from an angle, nothing, like super spooky or anything, just the way the angle was and how deep set the eyes were. And then like the fur, like either had long hair or whatever that kind of covered, like maybe blew across its nose or something, because I really didn't see the nose. That was what threw me off, because it was sort of like something was kind of covering the nose from, like, say, one side of its face to the other. And that's why, at one point I thought it was like a mask, like a scarf. But again, it didn't, the actual skin tone didn't match the skin tone of a human being and stuff. It was just, so I think there was like a hair kind of blowing across its face, kind of covering its face, and
I got you.
And that's and that's really about all I really saw of the face. What really kind of was got me thinking about it was a couple. I don't know. Sometime later, for some reason, my mom bought a coconut, and one side of the coconut was flat and dark, and I remember just staring at that coconut like, I've seen this thing before. It's like a deja vu moment, because that coconut, the way the hair on the coconut kind of covered the flattened side of the coconut and stuff, it was very similar to what I saw.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how far away from you was it when you first saw it? I mean, I realize we're going 40 years back, but...
Yeah. It was probably... I'm trying to be good with distances here. 30 feet, maybe
so relatively
40.
Close. Yeah, really.
Yeah,
not like it's a football field away or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And like the thing that was just, I had such a hard time concentrating on it, because the fur just seemed, or the hair, it just blended in with the trees behind him. Like I said, it was not like the cloaking thing, just the coloring. And then like the coloring of it, I think like I had a hard time figuring out where his arms and his legs were, because I think at first I was looking at his feet, but because he blended and because he was kind of walking at an angle and everything, and then blending in with those trees, I think sometimes I saw his arms and thinking, oh, those are his legs, or sometimes I saw his legs thinking, oh, those are his arms, because it was so tall. I wasn't expecting seeing something that tall, and it was just a weird, my brain just had a hard time wrapping around it.
Yeah, and I think that's normal. Do you think he was watching you guys, or do you think you stumbled upon him?
I don't know if he was watching us per se. We were kind of noisy kids. He probably was. My guess is he was probably doing whatever big feet do during their time, and a bunch of noisy kids started coming down this path, and he maybe at first thought, well, I'll just stay here, maybe they won't notice me. And we happened to stop right there and decided to climb that hill right where he was at. Even though he's across the way, maybe he was concerned we might spot him, and maybe he thought, well, I can get to this gully and go on around him. And then then my dog started walking around. Maybe he was afraid the dog would notice him and cause trouble. I don't know. But I mean, for whatever reason, he didn't really he didn't yell, didn't scream, if it wasn't for the fact I turned around and happened to see that, I don't think we would have ever noticed or had any idea. We didn't smell any odors, no rocks or acorns or anything being thrown at us, or pine cones or anything. In fact, I was trying to rack my brain, after all this time, because I didn't know about the whole pine cone pebble throwing stuff. I was trying to rack my brain and remember, was there ever a time that we had that? And us being ignorant kids, we're just blaming one of the other kids, stop that, not realizing it might have come from another part of the trees or something. But I can't remember anything like that.
So there really wasn't, nothing else really happened. This was only kind of the sighting on the property.
Yeah. As far as sightings that I know of, that's really about it. The only other thing that we had, I think I mentioned to you is, I can't remember if it was like maybe a couple weeks later or something. My family walked down that same 2-track to go, go fishing or something. And while we were walking, there was a spot, and there was a bare foot, like right in the middle of like the 2-track. And it wasn't humongous size, but it was one bare foot, and it wasn't from any of us. And I even brought up, hey, Mom, you remember I thought I saw Bigfoot through here. And there's and she's like, oh, no, it's probably from, one of the neighbor ladies or something down here. But that didn't make any sense to me, because it would like, well, wouldn't you see like more than one footprint, or even if she like had to take off her flip flops or something, when you see the track of the flip flop, or something. And, that never made sense. It was just one print in the middle of the 2-track. And, I would just think you would see more. And I don't know if it was, maybe it was somebody else that walked down there. It just didn't make sense to me that there would just be this one.
And most people don't take their shoes off in areas like that. You're talking 2 tracks. It's probably muddy. It's probably deep. Right. It's broken up. And who's going to walk through that? You know what I mean?
Right. And it wasn't humongous. So if it was a track of a Sasquatch, the only thing I can think it was, a younger Sasquatch, an adolescent of some sort, maybe, or, a child. But, and maybe still strong enough that they can, make great strides, that if we had looked off that 2-track, maybe we would have seen, another track, but we just didn't do that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I get that. A lot of times loggers will find people, what they think is people out walking around bare feet in the mud. And I remember, I've had loggers contact me, and they'll say, hey, I found these tracks, but they look human. I think a human was up there walking around. And yeah, they do look human, but when you look at a Bigfoot's foot, it kind of looks human. You know what I mean? It's but it's hard to say. What do you think that Sasquatch is, Scott? What's your opinion?
Oh gosh. Ask me in 15 minutes and I'll probably give you a different answer. But listening to some of the podcasts that I've been listening to, and listening, just different things I've pieced together. If I actually read some of the books and stuff, like whether is it the Quantum Sasquatch or the Quantum Bigfoot, that Moorhead, I think, wrote, and,
right,
and Genesis 6 and stuff like that, I'm beginning to think, and a few years ago I would have thought this was kind of wackadoodle, but I'm beginning to think that it might be descendants of the Nephilim. That's the only, being a Christian, I kind of have to come at the universe from a certain viewpoint and cosmology and stuff. And that's the only thing I can think of, that there's it's a God-created thing of some sort, some kind of descendant of a God-created thing anyway. And, some of the things that I've heard about, like the Book of Enoch and stuff, it gets kind of crazy that I never really thought about. And so, but I'm beginning to wonder if it's something like that, just a descendant of that. And I know a lot of, I've heard, that might explain why some of them look very human and some of them don't, because from what I understand about some of the things said in the Book of Enoch, and I think there's another book called the Book of Giants. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on it. It sounds like the Nephilim did a lot of breeding with, like, not only people but animals, And I don't know if maybe somehow, some way, there was a lot of crossbreeding between those offspring. And so you have some that look more animalistic, and you have some that look more human. And therefore, maybe some of them have more animalistic tendencies and more are not as animalistic, but they might have their quick tempers from, whatever animal genes they still have or whatever. So
Yeah, it's a good theory. I mean, it's hard to argue really with any theory because no one really knows. And I hope you're 100% wrong, to be honest with you, but you may not be. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
there is, when you start reading the historical text, there's a lot of things in there that are odd. Where they were mixing. If you believe it, they were mixing humans and animals and plants, and they were mixing everything. And the Book of Enoch goes into, even the Book of Jasher goes into that a little bit. So it is fascinating. And, it is interesting, too, how some seem to have very quick, short tempers and seem to want to kill you. And people who've seen them, that's what they read from the face, like, I just want to kill you. Then there's other times where it's not like that. The creature just gets up and kind of strolls away and doesn't really care one way or another. And there's no aggression. And so it's hard to pinpoint how they're going to react, and they're very unpredictable. And you bring a good point too. Some do look human and some do look more animal-like. And what's that about? So there's more questions than answers. You know what I mean?
And I don't, just spitballing that maybe if there is a lot of maybe interbreeding, inbreeding, and maybe many years ago there were other kind of hybrid creatures of some sort, and you just had all this crossbreeding at some point. There just might be, maybe that's where some of these other more bizarre things that people are starting to talk about, like Dogman, or the little people that I think you've talked about on some of your programs, the little hairy people and stuff. I don't know. I mean, it just gets kind of wacky doodle after a while. It's like, if you start believing one thing, how far do you keep believing?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, hopefully it doesn't just shock the world when it comes out one day, and hopefully people are paying attention, but I have my doubts on that. But, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to share your encounter, Scott, and your theories on it. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I really enjoy your program. I really do. And I've been listening to like 2 or 3 of them a day at least. So thanks. Thanks for having a forum like this. My situation was pretty mild, but I've heard so many other people that seem to really get some kind of catharsis, from being able to express their story. And, I for their story, I really appreciate you giving them a forum to do that.
Thanks, man. Thanks for the kind words. Welcome, Chuck, to the show. Chuck, thanks for coming on.
Hi. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. It's nice to have a local on. And I know you were just saying your first encounter actually happened in Louisiana, and I'd kind of like to start with that one, and then we'll talk about what happened in Oregon. If you would, tell us what happened. What did you see in Louisiana?
So it was about 12 years ago. I think I was about 15 at the time. Had just got a new girlfriend, and we were living in, like, off of Highway 1 in Blanchard, Louisiana. We were about 30 minutes away from Falk, Arkansas. And I just got a new girlfriend, and she texted me, and she's like, "Hey, why don't you come over? My parents are asleep." Me being the rambunctious teenager, was like, "Sure." So waited for my parents to go to sleep, and I opened up my window, super quiet like, and I started to like kind of put myself out the window so I could still stay quiet so I wouldn't wake anybody up. And from my window to like our fence line is a good 20-30 feet. And something told me, "Hey man, why don't you look up?" And so whenever I do, I like slowly start panning over to the fence line, and I see big chest, like lots of long, like auburn, I guess, like reddish colored hair, just like breathing. Like I could see the chest like inhale, like expanding and contracting just because something breathing. Didn't want to look any higher, and I said nope. So I went back in my house, looked down at my phone. I was about to text my girlfriend and tell her, hey, I don't really feel like coming out tonight. But she just texted me and said, just, where are you? And I was like, I guess I'll head over there. So I grabbed this little hunting knife that my dad had bought me a couple years before, and kind of like strapped it to my belt and like hung myself out the window again. And I heard whatever I saw walking away from where I was heading. So popped out and went over and whenever I met up with my girlfriend that night. And that was
the things we'll do for women. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. But I mean, after that point, I know like I never went anywhere without something.
Yeah,
like a shotgun or some kind of knife or something on me.
Yeah, and it has a long history of it down there. What did you? How far away from it from this thing were you when you were coming out of the window?
20 feet or so.
Oh wow, really close.
Yeah, super really close. Like I could see, like I can make out a very defined chest. Like I could actually see like it breathing. Like I could see its chest and ribcage expanding as it took a breath in. I could hear all that. And for whatever reason, I didn't look up at its face. I just stopped at its chest because I was like, I don't want to look this thing in the eyes. And we've had like around that area, we've had like animals go missing all the time, and everyone's just like, oh, it's a coyote. Oh, it's a cougar. It's a pig. It's nothing.
What did you think it was when you saw it, or did you know what it was?
I mean, I was kind of a nerd back in high school. I mean, I still am. I was a big nerd back in high school, and so I had like been like really avid into Sasquatch, and I had seen like the Legend of Boggy Creek whenever I was in 8th grade, so maybe like 4 years before then, and so I was like, possibly a Sasquatch. Who knows?
Yeah, that's interesting. Wonder if it heard you coming out of the window, knew you were coming out. And I find it funny, though, because, me now, I'd be like, no woman's worth that. I'm going to stay here. And, but at 15, I could see myself going, I'll take my chances. You know what I mean? I got a knife. I'm good to go.
Yeah, there was a part of me that I was like, oh, it's a big fascination. Because I love Sasquatch. I loved watching all the documentaries. I just loved watching any movie about that. It was super cool. And I was like, holy crap. That's actually what I'm seeing. Girlfriend wants me to come over. Might as well go ahead and do that. Because I figured it was safe because it was walking in the opposite direction, like deeper into the woods, and I was going away from the woods, so I figured I'd be safe.
Did you tell anyone? Did you ever tell your parents or anything?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, they thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it's probably just a homeless man. I was like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I can see that. So you moved to Oregon, and tell me about what happened in Oregon.
Okay, this was actually like super recent, like around my birthday. I had just turned 27, and we live 30 minutes from Vernonia, and we like to go camping out there. And me and my girlfriend, we also like to go night hiking. It's super fun. You basically just stay on the trail. It's usually one or two miles. Not that bad. Well, this day we decided to go night hiking, and we wanted to just go on like a horse trail. So it was a paved trail. So there's less chance of falling off, hurting yourself, or getting lost and all that kind of stuff because it's literally just a paved trail through the woods. Well, so we park in Stub Stewart, and then we walk to the horse trail. And let's see, we're loaded up with all of our gear because we know it's about 4 miles. It's like a 4 mile till the end of it, and then like a 2 mile walk back. And we start walking into it, and my girlfriend's kind of scared just because it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We're in the middle of the woods. And, you have every right to be a little spooked out. Well, we're walking, and we're no more than 100 yards into this trail, and we're hearing snaps, and we're hearing like something walking on the left side of the trail towards us. And so, I'm kind of sitting there. I'm like, we do see a bunch of black-tailed deer over here a lot because it's out of season, so they know they can be seen. Plus, there's campgrounds over here. People feed them, so they're not really afraid of humans. Well, we hear like a really big thud. I wouldn't call it like a tree knock or anything, but it felt like something heavy hit the ground. And so it's like, okay, not really paying attention to that and thinking it's just deer. We take maybe a couple more steps, and all of a sudden we hear like three very deep, very distinct grunts. And I hear it. I stop. I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything unless my girlfriend heard it. And I turned around and looked at her, and just to look in her face, and she's like, yep, she heard it. And so at that point, we stop, and we hear two things walking off to the left. I say things because I never got to see them. But we hear two very distinct footfalls on the left side, like walking near us and kind of like circling us and trying to get, I guess, behind us towards the start of the trail. And my girlfriend says she heard something off to the right, but I personally didn't, or I would have got us out of there a lot quicker because, surrounded just me, only a 357 in my holster. Don't like my odds there. We hear those three grunts, and we start making our way out, and we get out, and that was basically the end of it. We got a little spooked, and we were just like, no, because we definitely heard something, and we didn't want to see what it was, just because, again, three of them, two of us, I don't like my odds in that situation.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving. And I get a lot of reports from Vernonia. It's such a beautiful area, too.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people go, hiking through there. And did you ever go back?
Oh, yeah. We actually went back, this Thursday. My girlfriend was she was too afraid to really go any night hiking, even though I had like a bigger gun with us at the time. I had my my short barrel AR-10 like in my attached to my hiking pack. So I was like, it's fine, it'll be okay. And she just didn't want to get out of the car. So.
And did anything happen when you went back, or was it pretty much quiet?
No, it was pretty quiet. We didn't actually go onto the trail. We went to the parking area. We never even got out of the car.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? There was a time before that second encounter on my birthday that, because of the second encounter, it actually solidified what I saw.
And what happened?
Again, night hiking in Vernonia. We get down the main road, and then, we do about a mile and a half, and we turn around, and we had seen a bunch of black-tailed deer off to the left side of us. And, we stop, we shine, and we're like, oh, hey, deer, hello, how are you? And not thinking anything of it, I grab a flashlight, and I start shining it onto, the right side of the road, like looking to see if there's any more deer coming out. And as I'm shining the light over and panning it, left to right, I see something taller. What looked like it had long hair and upright on two legs, move further to the right away from the light and duck behind a tree. And so I was like, okay. I just kind of ushered my girlfriend back to the cabin. I was like, hey, let's just go ahead and get back. And, just on the off chance that what I saw was real, let's not be here anymore. I thought I saw like a human shape, like a larger human shaped thing on two legs with some long dark fur. And, we were across from 10 or 15 black-tailed deer. And I was like, okay, so I don't want to, it's probably hunting. I don't want to be caught in the middle of it because we are a lot slower than deer, and I probably taste better than them. So
yeah,
let's go ahead and get out of there.
So that happened before, did that happen before the other incident? Yes. Or after?
Yes, it happened probably 2 or 3 weeks before. And I was just like, I might have saw something. I might have just imagining it.
Yeah. Curiosity getting you, man. Yeah. That's why you went back.
Oh yeah,
he can't fool me. I know why you went back. You wanted to go back.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Not even gonna lie. I was definitely like, yeah, let's go and see if it's real. I want to see. I want to see this thing. I want to prove that it exists. That's just who I am. Because there's always this big debate, but it's like there's proof out there. You can't just say no if you're not willing to go and look.
Yeah, it's true. Did you tell your girlfriend what you saw that day?
Yeah, after we were safely back in the cabins. I mean, safe is a relative word.
Yeah, I'd be careful doing those night hikes out there, man. Like I said, I've had a lot of encounters from that area. But I will say, actually, from that particular area, the encounters I've heard have been pretty mild. They don't really seem to. I can't really think of anyone I've talked to from Vernonia or the surrounding area that really has had an aggressive encounter out there. It seems like they're more, I don't know what the word is, laid back. You know, they seem more chilled out there.
Oh yeah, like they, like, I don't know, whenever, you know, we went out there and they didn't like show themselves, and I didn't feel like they were being aggressive, but yeah, I was kind of on edge at that time.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. What do you think Sasquatch is, Charles? What's your opinion?
I mean, it's got to be an animal. Gigantopithecus existed. They have fossil records of it. It was found in China and Mongolia, and then around the time the whole land bridge came, and from its fossils, they say it's omnivorous. So it was probably a pneumatic creature, and it followed the animals over the land bridge and the land bridge crossed, you know, Russia, Alaska, and then into the Pacific Northwest. So logic says it has to be a creature that has existed, and it's probably just around or still around.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, be careful doing those night hikes, man. You guys have any plans on going back?
Yeah, I'm working for the next couple weeks, so after that we probably will.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share, man. I enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Hey, you know, if you ever want to join me on one of these night hikes, you feel free to, man.
Yeah, I might take you up on that. I'll come armed to the teeth, though. Hope that's okay. But
well, I've got an AR-10, the 300 Win mag, a 10mm pistol, and a 357. So
yeah,
feel free to use my arsenal.
Absolutely, I might take you up on that. Thank you again, Charles.
All right, no problem, Wes. Have a good day.
Let's jump back into the show. I want to welcome John to the show. John, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Wes. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. And I know with your first encounter, it kind of made me think of the second encounter with the Dogman. But in order to get to that story, I guess we got to tell the first story that happened in Nova Scotia. And if you would you mind starting from the beginning and tell us what happened?
Sure. So I was in summer of, I believe I was going into grade 8, and it's about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. My brother and his friends had a campfire down in the field. So we have a big field in behind the house, and we have a little path, and there's another little field, and it's surrounded by woods. So my brother and his friends, they're probably in their, they're probably 16, 17 years old at this time. I believe I was 12, 13 years old. So they were basically down there just having a fire pit, hot dogs, hanging out. They ended up all leaving, jumping in their cars and taking off kind of thing for the night. So my mom sent me down to go pick up after them, pick up all the food and all the condiments and everything. So, this summer I remember I had shorts and T-shirt on, and I walked down there with a flashlight and a grocery bag in my hand, and I was never scared of the woods, especially in my backyard. I was always back there. So I walked down, went through the little path, and went to clean up their mess, basically, and I was putting stuff in the grocery bag, and then all of a sudden I just hear this crazy growl coming from the woods, and it was pitch black by this time. I mean, I remember the moon shining, that's about it, and my flashlight, and that's pretty much all the light I had. So I remember this just growl coming through the woods, and it was so loud that it sounded like, I don't know, it just sounded like a huge dog, almost like if there was like some crazy monster that's in the woods kind of thing, and it was growling so loud, it was just going through my chest, and I could feel it in my body kind of thing. So I shone the flashlight into the woods, didn't see a thing, and then it growled again, and I got scared, and I honestly dropped the bag full of stuff. I dropped my flashlight because I could hear this thing moving, and then all of a sudden it was moving faster and faster, and I could hear the branches in the trees crashing, and it sounded like a freight train coming through the woods. So I dropped everything, started booting it back to the house, went through the little path, and once I got through the little path to the big field, all I could see was my house porch light and the kitchen light on, and that's what I was focusing on. So when I was running, that's all I was really staring at. This whole time, I felt like this thing was behind me chasing me. I could feel everything around me kind of move a little bit, so whatever it was felt like it was huge and heavy kind of thing, right? So I just booked it back to the house. I ran in, flung open the door, and my mom was in the kitchen, and I'm pale white basically, and she's like, what's wrong? And I was like, nothing. I was like, something scared me down there. I was like, I don't know what it was, but it chased me, and my mom was kind of like, oh, yeah. She's like, it's nothing. It was probably a coyote or something like that, because we have a lot of coyotes back there and deer, but I know whatever it was not a coyote. So I basically went in, and my dad came out, and he's like, what's wrong? And I was like, nothing. I was like, I got spooked, and that's the type of guy that he was an older guy and had a lot of heart problems, but I knew he would have grabbed one of his guns and went down there looking for it if I told him what I really thought it was. I didn't know what it was, to be honest with you, but I know it was huge, and it was no little, no coyote or even a wolf. It was bigger than that, and to me, it felt like bigger than a bear. It felt like a person was chasing me, and I know it wasn't a person. Whoever it was on 2 feet. So that's pretty much that story. I was scared. My parents, we never locked the door at night. I grew up in the country, and everybody knew each other. My brothers weren't playing a game on me. They were all gone in town. So I know they weren't there. And after that, I asked my parents to basically start locking the door every night.
I don't blame you. Did you guys go back down there to ever get the stuff and the stuff
that night? Nobody. We didn't go down. My mom just said we'll get it in the morning, kind of thing, because it was just like a pack of hot dogs and like a ketchup and a relish and a mustard bottle, right? So the next day, my dad and I went down there, and hot dogs were all gone, all eaten. The hot dog wrapper was still laying on the ground, and the bag was ripped open, and then like all the condiments and stuff were kind of like spread out all over that little lawn that happened on by the campfire. But I didn't really, at the time, I didn't even think to look for anything. Didn't even look to, we didn't see anything else. Basically, it was just all shredded and torn apart.
Yeah, the one thing I find really interesting about your encounter, and we'll get to what you saw that one day with the Dogman, but when you went home that night and you were telling me about the dreams you were having, and I was telling you, I don't mean to sound like a hippie, but I think sometimes our subconscious sees more than our eyes do. I'm a firm believer in that. But tell everyone about the dream you were having after this incident.
So that very same night, I basically, it was getting late, and I was creeped out and didn't want to tell anybody. Didn't want my parents to think I was going, nuts, basically. But I'm only like, I'm about 12, 13 years old. I go to bed that night, and I have this dream that basically in my dream, all the bedrooms are upstairs in my house. So my bedroom, my brother's bedroom, and my parents' bedroom. And then the kitchen and the living room's downstairs in the bathroom. So in my dream, all these wolves came into my house, searched. They were in the kitchen. Sounds funny, but they were in the fridge, like rooting through the fridge for stuff. They were going up the stairs. And basically when they come up the stairs in my dream, they're coming towards my bedroom, and I woke up. I woke up sweating and panicking. My heart was like racing. So yeah, that was that very same night.
Well, and I'd like you to talk about some of the, and I appreciate you sharing that, and I want you to talk about some of the weird things that happened outside of Bigfoot, or outside of this incident. But what I find interesting is you were telling me about the graveyard, which isn't far from that place, and tell us about that. What you saw in the graveyard that day. What were you doing, and what happened? If you wouldn't mind going into it.
Yeah, sure. It's really hard to talk about because I've only told it to you actually. So this would probably be about a year later. I was down. It's probably about 4 or 5 kilometers. Like, we're kilometers in Canada, but 4 or 5 kilometers from my house. And I was down at some of my friends. We were all, little couples. We had our girlfriends, and we're watching these movies and stuff. And me and my buddy decided that it's time to go home because it was getting around probably 7, 8 o'clock at night. And him and I were walking up the road, and then at the end of her road, he would go left and I would go right to go home. So we kind of talking about the girls and stuff, having fun. We were in really, really good spirits kind of thing. Just young kids having fun, right? So I went right, he went left. So I was walking home, and it's getting a little dark now, and like it's getting foggy out and stuff like that. Still nothing really crossed my mind. I was just walking home like on any other day. And I come up this little hill, and there's a cemetery on the right. And I'm just walking, and something catches my eye coming down the cemetery because there's like trees and it's foggy. So I see this huge figure, believe it or not, with almost like it was like a wolf's face, and it's on 2 feet, and it's walking down at the end of the driveway of the cemetery. And as soon as I see it, I stop in my tracks, and I'm just staring at it, trying to figure out what it is, if it's somebody in a costume or what's going on. But when I took a good look at it, it looked like the werewolf from Silver Bullet, to be honest with you. It had gray and kind of not curly hair, but just, I guess, thinned out hair. So it almost looked like a summer coat on a dog or something. I don't know. It was just like a gray and then silver, and it was huge, muscly. The legs were muscled. The shoulders were broad and big, and the thing wasn't even looking at me at first. It was facing across the road. And this is like a two-lane road. It's not used very, very often, especially at night, so there's not a ton of traffic on it. So while I'm staring at it, I'm frozen, and basically I felt like I was frozen in time with this thing. I'm staring at it, and then all of a sudden it looks over to the left where I'm standing, and I'm probably a good, I don't know how many, and I'm not good with distance, but I'd say, I don't know, maybe 100 feet, 200 feet away from it, like a little ways away, I guess, right? And it just stares at me for a second, and then looks straight ahead and puts his nose in the air and starts sniffing, and brings his head down, and his mouth is open, and I can see his teeth, like a dog's on the scent of something. And it's just has his mouth open and it's breathing hard, like it was tracking something basically. And it puts his head down, looks over at me one more time, puts his head straight, and almost 2 steps across the road. That's all it took. And then once it's on the other side of the road, it got down on all fours and took off through the woods.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. That's not far from your home, right? You said, 4 or 5 kilometers away?
No, it's probably, maybe not even that, maybe like a 15, 20-minute walk.
Oh, wow. That's really close. What did you think it was? What did you think you were looking at the time?
Honestly, in my head, I thought it was somebody. At first, I thought it was somebody playing a trick on me. But I was like, nobody. Then I started thinking, like, who would do this, and who could afford something that crazy, like, to look that good, right? And then I just thought, I didn't know what to think, honestly. Like, that's what I thought at first. And I started looking at it a little harder when I was staring at it, because it was staring straight ahead, so it still didn't notice me at this point. But when it looked at me, I knew it was something that was real and something not from this world, to be honest with you. It scared the shit out of me, excuse my language. But it just kind of freaked me out, and then it took off. So it looked like a wolf man is what I call it. But,
yeah, and I was telling you, I get a lot of reports of those, from cops that have almost hit them, and I don't know what to make of the Dogman. You get a lot of reports, too. I've heard of them coming out of graveyards, and I've been trying to put together what Dogman is, and there is a history of it, but I don't know if we're all talking about the same thing. Like with the Sumerians and the Egyptians, they talked about Anubis, and he was the god, he was a guardian of the underworld. And I find it strange that I've had a lot of Dogman reports around graveyards, which is weird. What you saw, would you say it was physical, or was it more of like a ghost?
Definitely 100% physical.
Physical, yeah. That's what everyone says. Strange, man.
Yeah, I could see the fur and skin on this thing. Like you could tell it was thick. It wasn't a ghost, like it was just I could tell it was there, and it knew I was there, and I'm just happy that it didn't want me. Whatever. That's why I think it was tracking something, or it was going. It knew where it was going. It could have had me in a second.
Yeah, I already had plans, and it was already going somewhere, and you were more or less just a nuisance, that had to stop and look at you. Thank God, because when a lot of reports of people get close to them, they're very aggressive, and a lot of people think they're going to die when they're too close to that thing. Did you? And you hadn't told anyone about that?
No, I've kept that a secret since I was 12 years old. I was 12 or 13, but I've never told anybody that story just because I've seen it in my dreams, to be honest with you, and I've seen it, I think about it, I've always thought about it over years. I'm 41 now, and I've always thought about that moment and how crazy it was, just that I've seen it myself, but I know what I saw. It was like if somebody said, you were just seeing things, there's no way, because like just the face on this thing with it was almost like it was smiling at me, but I think it was more of attracting something, and had his mouth watering, like he wanted to eat something, right? So I don't know if he was chasing like a deer or something like that, but
yeah, it's fascinating.
That was the scariest moment of my life, to be honest.
Oh, I can imagine, man. I can imagine. And so it's interesting that you saw that. It makes me wonder if that's what originally was kind of chasing you back to the house, especially after you start having dreams about wolves and coming into your home. I'm telling you, man, there's something to that. Yeah. I really think, and I don't mean to sound like a hippie, but I really think there's something to our subconscious. I think it sees more than what we see with our eyes. Did anything else strange happen around that home?
It did. So like I was telling you earlier, unfortunately, when my dad passed away, that's where he was buried, in that same cemetery. So like I was telling you before, like after, every time I go back there to see him, I go back a few times a year just to pay my respect, and I don't like going in there. I mean, it has nothing to do with him passing away. I just always get that eerie feeling, and it takes me back to that moment when that happened, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Another reason I probably didn't tell anybody either, because, it might make them feel uncomfortable that, our dad's buried there, but, that incident happened. But also another time in the same backyard of just a couple kilometers away where that other incident happened with the campfire and the hot dogs and everything. I was back there on our four-wheelers, so me and my buddies would go back there. There's a bunch of four-wheeler trails, and we used to do that all the time, kind of thing, right? But I'd always go with a buddy, and I'd always go in the daytime, right? By this time, I knew there's something in the woods. So this is like maybe like the same year, like a year later after all these other two incidents. So actually probably a couple of years. I think I was 15 or 16. So my dad had this old four-wheeler, and I used to take it back there, and I'd always get a couple of buddies of mine, and they get their dad's four-wheelers. So this one time, used to go back there quite often, never see anything, just see like deer or whatever. I always felt like something was watching me back there, no matter what I was doing. If I was walking through the woods or taking the four-wheeler back there, I always felt something odd back there. So the one day we went out all day. And at the end of the day, we were coming back, and we were going back these trails back towards my house. So they're all in behind that field that all that other thing happened. And so I'm following my buddy. So it's me. I'm on the back. I'm on the four-wheeler driving. My buddy's on his four-wheeler with my other friend. They're both on his four-wheeler. So I'm in the back, and we're just putting along this open trail, and there's no trees around. There's nothing really around. It's just like a road. I could put both arms out sideways and not touch nothing, basically, right? So while I'm riding this thing, something grabs my arm. Like it felt like a big hand on my shoulder, on my right shoulder. And when he grabbed my arm, he pulled back on my shoulder. It twisted because I had both hands on the four-wheeler, of course. So when he grabbed my shoulder, he twisted my arms also and my hands. And my four-wheeler, I wasn't going fast, but the four-wheeler actually turned right and kind of like hit into a tree. And I looked back right away because I know something grabbed my shoulder. At the time, I thought it was a ghost, to be honest with you. I don't know what it was, but it grabbed my shoulder. I turned to the right, hit the tree. My friends were just up ahead a little bit. They stopped and they came back, and they're like, "What's wrong?" And same thing. I'm like, I'm pale white, and these guys are like, "What's wrong with you? What happened?" I'm like, "Man, something grabbed my shoulder and twisted me, right?" And they're like, "Well, we don't see anything." And we got out and looked around. We didn't see anything at all, but I know for sure something grabbed me. I don't know what it was, but there's nobody living back there, or, our neighbors wouldn't have done anything like that.
Yeah, that's pretty unnerving. That's really unnerving. Do you mind talking about the entity that you saw? And if you don't want to, we don't have to, John. But I think it's fascinating because I've heard it so many times off the air.
So when I was same house, same property that I've been talking about these other encounters. My brother ended up moving out, so I ended up taking his room, and his room is located when you come up the stairs. you would see his room. You'd be facing his bedroom. So I took over his bedroom when I was 16, 17 years old. Every time I go laying in bed, I'd watch TV. So my bed was facing where if I was laying down watching TV, I'd be looking out the hallway, basically, right? So I've got the TV on, and I'd always like go up around 10, 11 o'clock, just like any teenager, go watch TV before you go to bed. And I'd always feel my parents would be in bed also, and they always shut their door. Nobody else was living in the house, and all the lights were off except for the TV. And I'd always feel basically somebody watching me out in the hallway. Not every single night, but usually a couple of times a month at least, or once a week. I'd always feel like this. Basically, I look out and I see this big shadow of a person with a top hat on, and it would always freak me out and creep me out. But I never told my parents because I didn't want my mom to be scared because she didn't like talking about ghosts or anything like that. I always knew something was there and something was weird. He'd always come out 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, just stand there and watch me for 20, 30 minutes, and I'd blink and he'd be gone, and then I wouldn't see nothing. And sometimes I'd hear stuff at night in the walls and stuff like that, but I always blame that on maybe an animal or something, I don't know. But I always hear scratching in my walls in my bedroom, actually, too. But this thing, I never felt like it was a threat. I just felt like it was just eerie and odd that he would stand there and stare at me. And then this is, like I said, I'm 41 now. So last year I was talking to my brother, and we were having a few beers, and we were shooting darts, and I started telling him about it. And I said, you know what? I was like, when I took your bedroom over, I'd always see this weird figure out in the hallway. And I go, when I'd watch TV late at night. And he said to me, he goes, you seen a black shadow man with a top hat? And when he told me that, I got chills and almost passed out because I couldn't believe that. He actually told me, he goes, I used to see the same thing when I stayed in that bedroom. That house was over 100 years old, but at the same time, I never really got the true story when I was younger, and I didn't mention this when we talked earlier, but something weird happened in that house that locals kind of told me, like kids told me, like something about a man and his daughter actually passed away when she was really young, I think. I don't know how, though, so I don't know if it was like, and he passed away, so I don't know if it was him coming back to like check on her and thought, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I've heard that entity showing up from other listeners. They'll say, hey, I got to tell you this, but I don't want to say it on the air. And I remember the first time I heard it, I thought, well, maybe it's someone who, like what you just said, maybe some guy died. It's kind of weird he has a top hat on, but, I believe you. And then I didn't hear about it again, and then I had another listener from a completely different state tell me the exact same story, and the top hat, and you can't see his face. He's black, from head to toe, and he just kind of watches, and it's not really like aggressive poltergeist activity. I've never heard of it. Everyone that's told me of seeing this entity, he just kind of stands there and watches. He doesn't really throw anything at you. He doesn't, attack you. It's just kind of bizarre. You know what I mean? If you ever get a chance to look it up, Shadow Man, Top Hat Man, I forget, they call him something. But I've heard it many, many times. And, your brother telling you is confirmation, really, of what you saw.
Yeah, my brother's not somebody, he's a country guy. Like, he's not one to tell you about, like, ghosts and stuff like that. Like he's a pretty laid-back guy, but I was very, very surprised when he told me that he's seen the same thing when he used to live in the same bedroom, right?
And
so that was really creepy.
Yeah, were you ever able to see a face or eyes or anything with it?
No, to be honest with you, I just seen this black figure, and sometimes I would say, Dad, what are you doing, Dad? Are you out there? Because I thought it might be him, right? But my dad always shut the door, and I could actually hear my dad snoring in the next bedroom when this thing's basically 2 or 3 feet from my bedroom door, just staring at me. And all I could see was a black figure with a hat, and just he was still. He never came in my bedroom. Excuse me. He never did anything. He never threw anything at me or said anything, or I could never hear anything. The only thing I could ever hear was scratching in the walls and stuff like that, which I don't know. That could have been anything, I guess. But
man, I bet you'd be great in a war. He'd be the guy I'd want side by side to me in a war, because you don't freak out over much. It sounds like, you know what I mean?
No, I think after that wolfman encounter after that. I wasn't scared of too much. Like, I've been in some crazy situations, and I stay pretty calm.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, tell me what happened in North Carolina. What was the place called? Pumpkin?
So Pumpkin Town, South Carolina. This is probably, I think, I'm trying to think of what year it would have been. Let's see, I'm just sorry, but it's about 14 years ago, because I remember I was 20 years, about 26, 27 years old. I took a trip down to Greenville, South Carolina, and I was with a couple of buddies of mine. Another one of my friends from Nova Scotia was on vacation down there with me. So there were three of us, three friends, one of my friend's brothers and his wife, and the couple was in the military, so there was 4 guys and a girl. So we go out to Pumpkin Town, South Carolina, middle of nowhere, and we were going camping. So it poured rain all day long. We got out there late. Everybody went ahead and set up camp, and me and my other friend, we got there late because we were picking up beer and stuff like that. So you have to walk, basically it's a convenience store, and you have to walk a mile into the woods just to get to your campsite. And there's nobody else there. We're the only ones. It was probably early in the season or whatever it was, but we made a fire, and we were hanging out, just catching up on old times kind of thing, drinking a few beers. And it gets kind of like late at night, 11, 12 o'clock, and fire's kind of going down, and the rain finally stopped. We actually put up a tarp so we could hang out underneath the tarp, and we had a picnic table under there. And everybody, we all go in this military tent. We all go to bed, so we're all in our sleeping bags. And we have my buddy's dog with us, Max. He's a Labrador. Everybody pretty much passes out. I think everybody had a lot to drink, but they're all pretty heavy sleepers. So, and I'm a super light sleeper, so I'm just about to doze off. All of a sudden, Max basically gets up and starts growling, and I can hear something coming towards the tent. And the way we're situated in the woods was the campsite, and then if you walk out of the tent, it's actually a big hill, and then there's a huge lake right in front of us. So Max starts growling, like going crazy. And I've never heard this dog growl like this before in my life. Super sweet dog. And then all of a sudden I just see this big shadow come up to the tent, and I can see it through the tent. And I'm facing the lake and the campfire. And then I see this huge shadow come up and just kind of stand there facing the tent. Like it was staring at us, right? It did have like a cone-shaped head, and I wasn't even thinking about Bigfoots or anything back then. Didn't know what to think. I thought it was a bear at first, but just the way it was standing up on 2 feet and long arms, I was just like, okay, this is something else. So I'm panicking. The dog's growling. I'm trying to basically wake up everybody. Nobody would wake up. We had an axe in the tent because I don't know why we brought it in, but we didn't want to leave it out there. So I grabbed the axe and I held it, and I was still laying on the ground, and I was waiting for this thing to start ripping open the tent, and I'm ready to start swinging. But it didn't. It just stayed there, and it just stared at me for maybe a minute or two. I was trying to get Max to basically shut up and not growl because I didn't want this thing to hear him. And then the thing just walks away and walks out of sight, and I didn't sleep all night, but it just never came back, and it never did anything else.
Yeah, it's terrible. Did you tell your buddies the next morning, or did you just kind of let it go?
No, I told them because they knew I didn't get any sleep because I woke up with that axe basically holding it on my chest. And I didn't wake up. I guess I was just laying there and maybe fell asleep for 20 minutes. But when we got up, I told them, and they were kind of didn't believe me. They're like, "Oh, you're just seeing things," but I didn't do any drugs or anything, that night, and I was pretty much only had 4 or 5 beers, so I know what I saw, and so does Max, right? So I didn't sleep at all that night. We drove an hour back to my buddy's house because we were staying at his parents' house, and I was so tired I had to go to sleep. And those guys went back out and went to the, I think they went shopping or something like that. But I ended up sleeping all day because I didn't sleep all night last night. That night.
Yeah, I had to laugh. You're like, so does Max. If Max could talk, he'd be like, hell yeah, there was something outside of our tent. We were a team that night.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's interesting too. The dog's reaction, to it might have got the thing to back off. It was, a lot of times when they come into camps like that, you always hear them taking stuff and going through stuff. And maybe Max growling it probably wasn't afraid of Max, but didn't want everyone waking up. It's hard to say. Or maybe it was just curious. What was your impression? Like it was just stumbled up onto the camp and decided to check things out?
I think it might have came from the lake and came up the hill. That's my vision of it, because when he was kind of like I seen a little, like I guess I was just trying to fall asleep and just staring at the tent, and then that's when I seen that Max started growling, very crazy, like a wild animal, right? And I've never heard him growl like that. And then all of a sudden, there was just a huge shadow appeared, and then it was just staring at me, and dog was going crazy. And I just felt like it was going to start ripping the place apart. It could have been a human, but there's nobody else out there but us. And it was, probably around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock by now.
Yeah, human doesn't really make sense, especially with the way Max was growling. Most humans would quickly back away, especially if they're coming in trying to be sneaky. Did it ever make any noise? Did it ever, was it, could you hear it breathing, or was it pretty much quiet?
The only thing I could hear was when it was, I knew something was coming. When he started growling, I could hear something almost like the ground moving when I could feel something coming up to the tent. So I could feel large, like something very, very large taking steps. I heard some breathing, but I don't know if that was me or Max but I could hear something. I can hear it breathing, but it wasn't overwhelming, crazy breathing, right? I think we surprised it when he came up over that hill, like he didn't expect that tent to be there. And I don't know, like I think he was more of like just looking at us, trying to see what we were, right? Kind of like what we were doing or whatever, but nothing. I don't think anything got touched in the campsite or anything like that either.
Just probably curious. What do you think Sasquatch is, John? What's your opinion?
I don't know. Like all this stuff happened when I was really young, and then when I got older, like I just recently in the past year or two, I just started thinking about, I started listening to your podcast, honestly, and then I'm like, man, that kind of like happened to me. That feels like, my situation, right? So I think they're out there. I think they came probably over from Asia. I don't know. I read something where, there was, what would they call it? The bridge or something from it over there?
Yeah, the land bridge.
Yeah, the land bridge. And I think they're here. I don't think, where I live, I think they're a lot in Vancouver, BC, and your way. I think there's a few here, very few in Nova Scotia, but I think they're here. I think they're, I don't know. I think they're Bigfoots, man. I've always thought there was something out there that was, because too many people have seen things, right?
Yeah, it's too hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but it's the fascinating encounters. With the Dogman, I don't know. Again, I don't even know where to begin with Dogman, but a lot of people have seen him. A lot of very, very credible people have seen this Dogman creature. I don't think I've ever talked to someone that saw it and I thought, they're nuts. You know what I mean? Everyone I talk to, you walk away and they tend to have a lot of details about what they saw and everything like that. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing it. I know some of the things you've never talked about, and I'm honored you would come on and share it on the show. Thank you for doing that.